Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Dan and welcome back for yet another episode. In today's episode, it's my first impressions about the new Canon R5 Mark II. This video right here. I've only had this camera for 4 days now. It's been great, right? But cannot review a camera based off of a couple of days of using it. Yes, I've used it a ton, but I cannot do a review just yet. But what I can do is tell you what I like and what I don't like about this camera right now, in this time. Mainly for photos, because I did not have much of a chance to use it for video just yet. Let's get into it. Let's get started with the ergonomics and build. The ergonomics on the R5 Mark II are great. They are very similar to the original R5 and R6, and I actually kind of like them. I do like that there is a big grip. I do like the smaller body. It's not very heavy. Actually pretty light. It's balanced very well even with the 50mm f1.2 RF, and yeah, I really actually like it. The viewfinder is very good. The screen is great actually. It's very bright, very sharp, responsive, and I have no complaints about it. But regarding the viewfinder, I am used to this camera here, the R3. This is my main workhorse, as you know. And the viewfinder here is actually superb. On the original R5 and R6, the viewfinder wasn't very good. Now the R5 Mark II is improved, yes. I do like the viewfinder, but I do find it to be not quite as large as this one on the R3. Which is not the biggest of deals, but something you should know if you maybe used the R3, or if you are considering this camera to be a second camera, or even your main shooter, because of the 45 megapixel sensor. It's not a deal breaker to me, the viewfinder, but I guess you should know that. The autofocus here on the R5 Mark II is actually great. I did not expect it to be this good. It's very close to my R3, maybe a hair better, maybe a tad bit worse at times, but it's very good. I have no complaints about it at all. Very predictable for me, as I'm coming from the R3, and I like the autofocus system. It's very nice and very robust in this kind of a camera. It really is, I feel like, the best in the market. And if you are comparing this to a Sony A1, for example, and I've used the A1, I feel like this one, the autofocus system in the R5 Mark II, is actually a little better than the Sony A1, just head to head with my R3, which is great for the price point, you know. This is $4,300 US. I don't think there is any other camera in this price bracket that gives you as much as this camera does, as this one does. Battery life on this camera. There is a new battery type. It's called the LP6P. It's a little larger in capacity. It gives out a little more voltage to the camera, and it's a very good battery. I've used it yesterday for a couple of hours of street photography and portraits. Shot a lot of photos actually in low speed burst mode, because that's my favorite mode to shoot. Had no problems. Came on with 50% battery, which is actually very good and not too shabby for this smaller kind of battery. My R3 does better, but the battery is insane. Okay, let's get to the reason that you're gonna buy an R5 II over the original R5, and that's the sensor and shooting speed. The sensor allows for that shooting speed, so let's talk about it. It's a new 45 megapixel BSI sensor. What that means is backside illuminated sensor, stacked sensor. It's really good. I didn't find that drop in dynamic range that everyone was raving about a week ago. I really didn't see that. I've used only electronic shutter until this point, and I feel like it's got a pretty good dynamic range. Maybe a tad worse than the R3, but not much, and not something to be worried about for everyday shooting scenario. And especially if you are a seasoned photographer and you know what you're doing, then you have nothing to worry about. This sensor is great, dynamic range is good, ISO performance. This is important to me because I do a lot of night photography and a lot of low light stuff. I'm mainly using fast lenses, you know, so low light isn't really a problem nowadays, but I did want to push the ISO to see whether or not the files would break, and yes, I've pushed them to 2500 ISO, 3200, 4000, 6400, and I'm happy to report I have no problems with the files because yes, they are more grainy than my R3. When you export the files from Lightroom to a lower megapixel count, then everything is compressed and you are left with a clean image. And unless you pixel peep a ton, you wouldn't see any difference in noise. Color quality coming out of this machine is actually very good, and in comparison to my R3 as well. Yes, this sensor captures a lot more detail than the R3 ever did. And that's just because of the megapixel count. This is a 45 megapixel, the R3 is a 24. Is that such a big difference? Yes, it is for some types of photographers. I don't really care. I do like the extra megapixel. Yes, it's fine, it's good to have, and I'm not complaining about it as long as the performance is really good. Nothing to say about a megapixel count because I really don't care. One thing I've found in comparison to my R3 is that there is a little more shutter lag. I don't want to say lag because it's not that, but when you use the R3 for over a year, you know that when you press the shutter, even if it's slightly out of focus, then you've captured the moment. You never miss a shot with the R3. Never. The focus acquisition is very quick, even from completely blurred to when the moment you press the shutter, it's in focus and it's fine with whatever. The R3 is amazing at that, and there's no lag from the moment you touch the shutter until the photo is taken. On the R5, I don't think there's a lag, but it's just a tad bit slower than the R3. And that's just nitpicking here, because the R3 is a flagship. It was a flagship, right? For me, it still is. The R1 hasn't came out yet. It's not being sold right now. Well, this is just nitpicking here. Finally, for Canon on a mirrorless camera, in the video mode there is C-Log 2. And C-Log 2 is a big upgrade. It's like my C70 does. And my R3 could do it, but you had to shoot in 6K RAW and then change the log curve in post to C-Log 2. It worked. You gained a little more dynamic range and better performance, but it's a workaround for something that Canon refused to do in camera. This camera does C-Log 2 in every mode. It does 10-bit in every mode. Lots of compression options, lots of frame rates, lots of resolution. It does 8K, 4K, S-RAW, and RAW in 8K. It does everything you would want. 4K 120, and actually amazing. And from what I've seen, I've done just a little bit of testing inside. The video quality is actually really good. And one thing I really actually liked is they added a waveform on the screen, and that's amazing. It's like my C70. It makes this camera a little more usable for me. If I throw it on a gimbal as a B cam to my C70, then yes, I have a waveform and I know what I'm doing. It's much better than Instagram and a better exposure tool for me. Also, if I want to hook it up to an Autofocus recorder or just a screen, I have a full-size HDMI port on the side, which is a welcome addition, you know? On my R3, on that big of a body, it's only micro HDMI, which is garbage. There is actually one more really cool addition. When you are switching to video mode and you start recording, you get that tally lamp here. As you see, it's really a welcome addition, because when you are shooting video and you're shooting yourself especially, I want to know if I'm recording or not. Also, the card configuration here is great. It does the same cards as my R3, SD cards V90 and the CF Express Type B. Both are good, and I like the combination of both actually. Also, this does shoot really fast. It does 30 frames a second in full resolution RAW, 45 megapixels, no limitations. Does that to the CF Express and SD card also. So that's amazing. And you don't lose anything because it's still a 14-bit file, still a full resolution RAWs, and you can dial it down, of course, 20, 15, 12, whatever. I usually shoot with actually around 15 frames a second. That's my sweet spot for everyday kind of stuff, unless I'm just shooting street photography and then single shot, right? Yeah, I will include throughout this whole video photos that I've taken with this. Keep in mind, this is just my first impression video, and I'm actually really liking this camera. Maybe this will become my actual go-to camera for everyday type of stuff. Stay tuned for the full review. I will do a review about both photo and video, and maybe some tips and tricks for this camera to maximize the results that you are going to get with it. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.